quarantine. Yeah.
Kurt, let's go live now. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ron Gacious. I'm chair of the City of Lawrence's Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and we will commence our March meeting. First order of business is public comment. Do we have anyone in our audience that would like to make a public comment? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
Nicholas Ward here representing Tennyson homeowners. I just wanted to say that there is the application that's submitted by the city where we help administer some of those funds in the programs we do. So if there's questions that I can help with anyway, you can just call on me at any point. And then the same goes for our application. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Next order of business is to approve our minutes, and we're going to amend the minutes. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have a motion, or there will be a motion to amend the minutes. I'd like to have a motion to move the minutes, and then we will have a substitute motion to amend them and move them. Does that make sense? Or do you want to amend them first? Diane, what does the city do on amending minutes? Do you folks make a motion to pass and then amend, or do you amend before you even have a motion to pass?
It's helpful to, I would suggest going ahead and amending it and then approving the amended minutes.
Okay. Do we have any amendments to the minutes of last meeting?
I would like to make an amendment
Yes, Christina.
for the minutes of last meeting, for the vote for or against the 800 Penn Street lofts.
Yes.
I'd like to place a vote. I didn't place a vote at that time, but I would, do I make that vote that I would say now, or?
Well, what you did at the time was you abstained from voting.
I abstained from voting, correct.
And you'd like to probably have the minutes reflect that you abstained from voting.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And is your motion to adopt the minutes as amended? I guess we haven't amended them yet. Do I have a second for the amendment?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion to move the amended minutes?
So move.
Do I have a second? And a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's have our monthly financial report.
Good morning, Danielle Bushcutter with the Finance Department. And if I can click over here. Here is the 2020 financial report. So we have 2 months of our sales tax revenues in place. We also have the $350,000 that was transferred from the general fund that's being reflected in the revenues of $512,000, almost $513,000. And then the expenses of about $225,000 that is rollover from that final allocation in 2019. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but so far, sales tax projections are looking like they are right on track with what we budgeted.
Mm-hmm. Any questions for Danielle? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
What would happen if our projections dipped after we committed dollars?
We typically haven't committed dollars until we have them. The question of the funds that were discussed at the last meeting, the $550,000, any kind of allocation like that, if eventually approved by the City Commission, we would always have a caveat that we have to have funds on hand for that to be granted. Additionally, I would note that we do have some monies that we know are already in the bank, which are the general fund dollars.
All right. Agenda item C2, all about home.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would like to recuse myself at this time
very good.
as an applicant.
Thank you, Erica.
Same.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, so with home, we did send out on Friday an update to the agenda. We received our information from HUD indicating the exact amount of funding that we will receive. So I went in and amended the documents. So this is our final funding. And so the City of Lawrence was awarded $446,291 in home funding for the 2020 program year, which begins August 1st of 2020. And so I've updated some of the calculations on this form to show that out of that amount, there's an automatic 10% that's removed for the city to administrate the program, which is that $44,629. So that's subtracted out. There are some regulatory caps that are set by statute that we have to follow in allocating funds. And so of that $446,291, a minimum of 15% has to go to CHODO activities in the community. And so I've calculated that 15% is $66,943. That is a minimum. You are required to award at least that amount, but if you feel obligated, you don't feel obligated, but if you would like, you are allowed to award more than that. And so when we go into the actual spreadsheet and we can step through how entering that amount changes what's available for other applications to be funded. There is an optional CHODO operating that you are allowed to award, and that's subject to a 5% cap of the $446,291. So if you were going to award the CHODO operating funds, that amount maximum would be $22,314. So if you were to award the minimum of 15 and the maximum of the 5, that would remain $337,405 to award to the other applicants. So just a quick, I've updated this spreadsheet to indicate each one of those amounts. And so I've kind of highlighted here this cell in green. That's that one that you're required to award at least a minimum of $66,943. So you'll have to keep that in mind during your deliberations as we review each application, that you have to fill in that cell has to be awarded something. So as you can see, we had a total of 5 applications from 4 applicants. As Nicholas spoke earlier, the first-time homebuyer program, the city kind of works as a pass-through for those funds. And so we had completed the application, the Community Development Division, but it's Tenants to Homeowners that runs that program for us in the Lawrence Community Housing Trust. Those funds are used for down payment and closing costs to assist a first-time homebuyer to purchase a home. And I thought we could just run through each of the applications real quick. So that is our application for that first-time homebuyer funds, and that was a request of $100,000. Also received was from the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority, and their application is for what's termed as tenant-based rental assistance under the home program. And that is a voucher program specifically for homeless, to put them into housing for 24 months. And during that time, they do receive ongoing case management. And if they succeed and graduate through that 24-month program, they'll automatically be moved up to receive one of the Housing Choice Section 8 vouchers from the Housing Authority to continue on to be housed. And so they are asking for $300,000 for their application for those vouchers. We also received an application from Lawrence Habitat for Humanity. They are building their 105th home here in the city, and they're asking for $25,575 to help in construction costs. As you can see in their budget, those funds would go directly towards concrete for the foundations and driveways. And it is for one permanently affordable new construction home. And then Tenants to Homeowners, there's actually 2 applications they've included in theirs. That's that CHODO set-aside project funds that you're required to award at least a minimum of the 15%. And then also their application for those CHOTO operating funds, where you're allowed to award up to a maximum of 5%. When they had originally filled out their dollar amounts on here, obviously we were working with estimated funding. That's why I went in and adjusted on the spreadsheet the actual 15%, and if you so wish, the 5% cap. I don't know, if Danny, if you want to speak with anything?
I don't really have anything in addition to add. Probably do want to touch on the matrix that we sent to you. This is the first year that we have moved the funding from the Community Development Advisory Committee to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. We did not use a matrix previous to this, so we did our best to try to put together a matrix that encompassed the strategic plan information, our Step Up to Better Housing information, our consolidated plan information, and just a way to hopefully be able to kind of review the applications against each other. We're well aware that there are some problems with it, and there's probably some things that we should have filled out ahead of time as we were going through the CDBG applications that we're doing in staff. We came across those and realized that that was not filled out for you guys. So if you would like to use that matrix just kind of as a guide for your conversation and, jot down any notes you want on there or give us any feedback on it and questions, that would be great. The score doesn't necessarily have to factor into your discussions, so if that makes sense. And we apologize, like we told the CDBG folks too, this is our first go around with changing all of this, and you have very different funding goals and very different applications, so sometimes getting that matrix to be able to look at all of them is difficult, so.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments about the matrix. I really struggled to get some of the projects, or to apply the matrix to some of the projects, and then to compare them side by side. And we've talked about this discussion some in talking about trust fund dollars, and it's not so much for me the debate about do we fund hard assets or services or some blend of hard assets and services. That's not so much the discussion for me. I want to fund both, and we'll, by consensus, this advisory board will make good decisions as to what the balance should be. We may want some guidance. We may want to set some guidance for ourselves. I mean, we've talked about separate buckets of money and stuff like that. I think those discussions will continue. But for me, the real difficulty is in applying the same matrix to the projects that are so dissimilar to rental assistance, versus supporting the construction of hard assets, because they're just going to skew completely differently. They're going to a good project in hard assets is going to score completely differently than a good project for services, and then the design of the matrix ends up being tipping the scales because there'll be just some unintended bias in the matrix outcome that will tend to skew direct comparisons one way or the other. So I really struggle with applying the matrix, and I appreciate that staff also struggled with trying to figure out exactly what to put on there as guidance. I do think that they are all good things to talk about. I mean, they're all topics that need to be understood with each of these projects, how they apply.
Well, and perhaps going forward, it's more of a discussion matrix, if you will, instead of a scoring matrix. So then you kind of have those talking points to look at. So it's a learning process. So we'll continue to.
And that's definitely the way that I kind of look at it, is if we just took these scoring columns out of here and used the description column as she said, talking points, that staff would be able here to answer anything that you would have about a specific applicant and perhaps like their past performance. Obviously, you're not in the day-to-day reporting like we are, and so you wouldn't really have an idea what their past performance is. But staff, we would absolutely say that each of these applicants, as you can see, we provided you with past funding history. We have funded each of these applicants before, and we have not had a single issue with any of their performance, whether it be monthly and quarterly reporting or the on-site monitoring that we do. So, you know, if we were actually using a score, they would all be 10s in that column. But
Yeah.
if we take out the scoring and just discuss that each of these applicants meet or exceed our requirements for the program, if we had an applicant that did have some past performance, we would be able to explain to you during this talking point the problems that we had with them. But
I do have a question about how home funds are different from our affordable housing trust funds. The home funds, I've noticed on the scoring matrix, the question is whether or not they serve constituencies at 80% of AMI or below. And talk to us a little bit about where the 80% AMI comes from.
Yeah.
In this case for home fund.
that is set by the HUD regulations.
Okay.
That all of the home dollars have to serve clients at below 80% of the
Okay.
area median income.
Is there any directive from HUD on giving which portion, if any portion, of that group of citizens at or below 80 AMI are to be prioritized over other purposes? I mean, are there some stated goals for the home fund that would guide us in understanding where the feds think these dollars should be spent?
Obviously, there's different types of projects, owner, rental, and then the
Yep.
vouchers.
Yep.
And so they've set those statutory limits of 80 definitely across the board, but they understand that's kind of why they designed the voucher, the tenant-based rental assistance program, that's specifically for homeless individuals. And so if you read the Housing Authority's application, the majority of the people that they help with those funds are below 30%.
Yeah.
And so HUD understands that, and that's why the vouchers are an eligible program, even though they set that 80%. So as a person moves through that housing spectrum, they can, work their way up to where they are out of the 30, they're into the 50, the 60, and now they're, into 80, but they still qualify for the funds. They wouldn't have to leave the program within the 2 years if they, got income high enough. And so it's not that they direct a certain percentage, but it is that they designed a program specifically for homeless, understanding that those are going to be your lowest of the income.
Okay.
And I think maybe to answer your question, they don't necessarily give us that, something that says these dollars have to be used for 80% or below, but we would like to see you focus on 50 to 60%. They don't give us any guidelines like that.
Okay.
So it's just, since it's federal money, there's one federal AMI requirement across the board.
And for the purposes of these funds, the feds are intending to serve everything from transitional out of homeless to first-time homeowners.
Correct.
Okay.
My question would be, I understand that since this is a move from one organization allocating the funds to a different one, can you say how in the past the priorities have guided you so that we don't make such a radical shift that we shake up or destabilize anything? What's been the guiding principle for how the funds have been allocated in the past?
We have if you look at that historical funding, there were some situations at times, and that's kind of one way where we were getting away from this and having this change and trying to align goals more with the city commission's strategic plan and some of our own plan priorities. In the past, there were some instances where instead of having to take on that tough discussion of deciding who gets what and who gets what, there was let's just split it all between them, between every applicant. And we really, really want to get away from that. That's not a fair application process. It's not fair to, apples to apples, especially in a voucher situation or a new asset situation, to be dividing the funds. And so I know it's tough, but those that discussion really needs to happen on an application by application level instead of just, let's just divide the funds. So I can give you some just information in the past on how they've usually started out. We usually have this live document going, and they'll start out by putting in that minimum that they're required to of the 15%. And so if we entered that number, you can work down and see how much now is left to allocate between the others. And then you can kind of go application by application, and we can fine tune and put numbers in and out, and you can see what's left and what needs to be funded and what unfortunately is not going to receive funding, because as you can see, there are more requests than the money that we have to award.
Okay.
Edith, that's a great question, and I wouldn't want us to veer in our outcomes significantly from what has happened in the past, unless there was a thorough discussion of some change we were trying to affect, and all of the affected agencies had like a year heads up that there was some change. I expect our outcomes today to be, within the ranges of what the other advisory board had recommended in the past.
You can see in that past that last year, unfortunately, Habitat was not awarded any funding.
Yeah.
And that was because we were working with estimated dollars. They had originally awarded them. When we got the final number from HUD, it came in significantly lower that we estimated, and so the board had to go back and make that tough decision, and unfortunately, Habitat was removed from the allocation at that time.
Okay.
We are now working with actual dollars, so we won't have to adjust these, but it is something to keep in mind that it was nothing wrong with their application that they were not awarded last year. It just came down to we had less money than what we had originally estimated.
Mm-hmm.
And I can add with that, when they were making the adjustments after that final allocation number came in, they had a discussion about leaving a dollar amount in there for Habitat, but it was a very low dollar amount compared to what they asked for. So they ended up not doing it.
Yeah, I think.
Just because it was going to be a lot of
Yeah, I think it was.
paperwork for-
It would have been under 5,000
Yeah.
was all that would have been available to be awarded to them. And at that time, Habitat was, an applicant here and was asked at that low amount, is that still an award that would help you? You have to remember that along with these federal funds, there are lots of strings that go along with it. So they're required for a period of X number of years to monitor that program, to report to that program. And so unfortunately, at that such low amount, less than $5,000, it just wasn't worth their project and their time that it would take to administer that for the next 15 years for that low amount.
Okay, that's very helpful, because when I took a look at this, I pretty much said, well, what would happen? I don't want to go too fast, but I had an opinion already. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I said, what would happen if everybody got what they got last year and we included Habitat at their request for this year? And that would mean that we would be at about $412,364. And then there would be an additional $14,298 left. And I would give that to Homeless Transitional Housing Program.
I like that approach. I think we need to not give the CHDO set aside the same as last year, which was $60,298. The minimum required is 15%, which for this year is $66,943.
Oh, yeah, you have to increase that.
Yeah, so you have to make
increase
that adjustment.
That's right.
I looked at this, well, let's.
But you get the idea.
Yes, ma'am.
That's-
Yes, ma'am. Other comments?
I should probably make public record that there's one of these projects that would benefit Family Promise clientele more than the others. And so I just, as a seat, as representative of that, one of these projects has the opportunity to benefit more of the Family Promise clients. Does so I need to make that understood.
And that's the TBRA, tenant-based rental assistance. Yep.
See, I didn't even know that, but I like that.
Yeah. Your agency, Family Promise, ends up serving most or all of those folks?
Yeah, it's a requirement for homelessness, so we're
Yeah.
one of the referring agencies for that
Okay.
program. We don't
Okay.
get any funds directly from that, that's why I'm not recused.
Very good. Other comments, questions?
Did I understand you correctly that you wanted to avoid that type of equal distribution again?
There was just some difficult times in the past where, we got to, you put in the minimum of this, you put in the minimum of that, and now there's 359,000. Let's just divide that equally between all of the applicants, and that's what we would like to get away from. Instead, it would be more of your discussion, as you're saying now, that we would like to entirely fund this applicant. We might have to reduce this applicant, but eventually we would work to get that number instead of just right off the bat saying, we have 400,000, let's divide it between 4 applicants, they each get 100,000 and we're done.
Yeah. You want to see something more thoughtful than just splitting it into equal shares and sending them home. Yeah,
And as you
yeah.
remember that you're just the recommending body on this, it does have to go to the city commission, and so I'm sure the city commission would enjoy also a thoughtful discussion by you all in your recommendations instead of just let's divide it by 4 and be done.
And to kind of speak to your point that you had made, the City Commission, we will go to them before the application process next year and ask them about their priorities and goals for the federal dollars. So kind of what you had said about not wanting to drastically change funding without at least giving a heads up to the agencies, I think helps in the discussion you're having now. And then we should have some more guidance going forward as to what their priorities and what they would like to see are. So that would probably help guide the discussion too.
And another layer of connectedness that I'd like to see us discuss sometime this calendar year is, if we could build an overlay of how home dollars get spent and trust fund dollars get spent, so that we could, coordinate that. I mean, we may decide, for example, we want home dollars to emphasize first AMI under 30. And some of this other stuff, we want to do that, but we're going to do that through trust fund dollars or vice versa. I don't know what that mix should be. But I think having both of them on the table in front of us, that ought to be the advantage of sending this decision-making on the home projects to us, is that we can start to coordinate them, see, do we have any unintentional overlaps that we're not recognizing, or more likely, where are the gaps when you lay these two programs together that still need to be filled, or are we spending enough money combined from these programs that we're addressing the highest need areas, or do we need to reconfigure somewhat? I think that'd really be a great topic for us to spend on as our policy discussion one of the upcoming months.
And it could also be a helpful conversation when you have your study session with the City Commission too, just to kind of see how they view
and
all of this.
do we have a date for that? We don't have a date for a study session with the city commissioners at this time, do we?
No, I think any guidance that you all have on a general time frame would be helpful. And then I can go from there to figure out possibilities. But if you know you'd like it within a certain number of months or et cetera.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question just that was brought up here in this discussion. Is there a trigger point where the requirements for the federal money is worth it? 5,000
Entirely up to the applicant.
Would be up to the applicant.
Okay.
That's a question for the applicants, if you have specific ones you'd like to ask.
I'm glad you're here.
Hi, Audie, how are you? Good. See you.
I do have a little question, because I'm looking at the email I received, and I know that there's some updated information, there's some numbers, lots of numbers. that are different. Could you explain, and this is the very beginning of your conversation, so I apologize, you have to go all the way back. But I'm looking at a number here that says 361,789, but then I heard that there's an actual amount in the amount of 446,291. Okay.
Pull up this funding sheet again. Yeah, okay, so this one.
So there's a difference between $84,502 dollars here for the projected amount that I'm looking at for the final summary, and then for an updated amount that was spoken to today. Could you explain just a little bit? I know you did a lot of explaining, but just so I can understand it, the amount and the difference, and how you came up to that conclusion.
So if we start at the top of this sheet, that the award that the city received was $446,291.
Okay.
And then we are projecting that we'll receive an additional $25,000 in what's termed program income. And so program income are, in the past, if the city held a mortgage on somebody's property that we assisted them to get into housing, and then they sold that house, depending on the contract that they were under, they might be required to repay some of those funds to the city. And so as those old projects get paid off, that's where that program income number comes from. And so we're estimating that we'd have $25,000. So if you take our original award, the $446,291, and then add that projected $25,000, that gets us up to $471,291 in total funds that we're working with.
Okay.
I think a little bit of the confusion too might be that when we sent the original one out, we went ahead and took, I went ahead and took the administration line out just so it didn't confuse the issue. It ended up way confusing the issue, so I apologize.
Okay.
So that's maybe why it looks considerably different, is because that 40,000-ish that goes to administration was not included in the first one that we sent out.
And those statutory requirements, the 10, 15, and 5%, those can only come out of that base that the city was awarded, the 446. None of those can come out of that program income. Mm-hmm. And so that program income just gets rolled into that final category of the amount of dollars that are left after we take out the 10% for admin to run the program, after you take out the 15% for CHODO activities, and then if you were to choose to award the 5% for CHODO operating.
Has the CHODO operating been been funded at 5% for a number of years?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
I think we can
And
go back.
those funds stay internal to the city to help pay for the administration of the program, is that correct?
It goes to tenants to homeowners. As of right now, they are the only CHODO that operates in the city of Lawrence, so it goes to them for.
Okay, they are our CHODO.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
We can have more than one, but we, at this time, only have one.
Yeah.
Was there other questions you had on those numbers? It can be confusing as we subtract out the different of those statutory amounts, and that they cannot include any of that program income funds. And so remainder of what we're left with, if you choose to award that minimum and or that maximum, will determine what's left for the other applications. And so that's kind of why the spreadsheet here, just for talking points right now, if we filled in that minimum on this line, you can see what's left to allocate to the other applicants.
Thank you. And we did get more than our estimate too, so that also changed the numbers.
This year, luckily, we received more than we estimated. Last year,
Doesn't
we
happen
received.
very often.
Well, we have to think about, is that really wonderful or not? That's actually bad for our city that we received more funds. That means our situation got worse.
Yeah.
That means we had.
Because it's a formula.
That means we had more individuals in poverty, more individuals in housing situations, either cost burdened or living in inadequate housing that needs repairs. And so why it's great to have more money to work with, unfortunately that means population-wise we moved the needle the wrong way.
So that would be
Yeah, we do have applicants here, if you have questions for any of them. under specific, I don't know if you want to allow each one of them to speak, or if you're.
I would like that a lot, and allow the board to ask each of them if they have any questions for the applicants. Shall we transition to that right now? Who'd like to speak to us about the first-time homeowner program with the Housing Trust?
Nicholas Ward here with Tenants to Homeowners. Do you have specific questions at all, or?
Well, yeah, I think everyone's had a chance to review the applications. What questions would anyone have? Or do you have any comments that have been initiated by anything you've heard from the board discussion?
No, I think the way that these funds are utilized is pretty straightforward. It's for first-time home buyer, subsidizing first-time home buyer transactions, and also for closing costs and resale. And so it's just, that's a huge impediment to people. A lot of times people maybe make enough funds to pay a mortgage, but they have a really hard time getting a hold of those funds that would be necessary to give what's required for a down payment on a house. And so these funds allow us to greatly subsidize that and get folks out of do the step up to better housing and get them out of a rental situation and into a home ownership situation with the housing that we're either constructing ourselves or the housing that we're bringing in off of the market that's already built housing.
I'll reveal my bias. I have a lot of heart for this program because in 1980, whatever the federal program that was the forerunner of this was how I bought my first house. So, yeah. I have a question. The $100,000 request, I think the notes were that might help, what was the number, 12 to 15?
Yep. Yeah, it was 10 to 15.
Okay. How many were you able to help last year with the $72,940?
So last year we did 10 total. And so one of the things that's also incorporating in, though, that maybe is not as clearly defined is that when we do an acquisition off of the market, that this also helps us subsidize what we'd be acquiring off the market to bring it down to an affordable rate for someone as well. And so we constantly have those opportunities in front of us, but we don't necessarily have the funds to do it. So if we have a house that's available in good shape for $140,000, but we really need to get that down to $110,000 for someone to purchase it, these funds also help with that. And so you see that range in there of 10 to 15 because it's insinuating that we're helping with first-time home buyers, we're also helping with closing costs, and then we're anticipating the opportunity to do some of those where we would bring down the price and allow someone to get in at an affordable rate.
Okay.
So that's why there's that, kind of not a specific number.
So if that scales back, it just scales back the number of people you can assist.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's
some of the regulatory, we're not allowed under the home funds just to give every first-time home buyer $5,000.
Yeah. Right.
We actually have to do underwriting and determine how much they need in order to make the house, that they can make the monthly payment. And so part of that underwriting includes current debt that they have, car payments, credit card debts, any other outstanding debts. And so we have to work with those numbers, and each individual applicant then comes down to how much they need. And so even though most of the times, almost every, in the price ranges that we're talking about, the closing costs are usually around $3,000. We can't just give them $3,000 across the board.
Right.
So we do have to figure each individual applicant separately. And so that kind of does change on how much funds are available. One applicant might need a whole lot more than another. And we have, in the past, been able to reduce the housing price on the base by like $30,000, and then even assist the person with any more needed down payment and closing costs in order to make that situation work, where we're not putting them in a cost burden situation right off the bat with their mortgage payment. So And that does kind of change how much can be used for each of the applicants.
I think another thing that's great about it, especially when we're bringing down that initial cost of the house, is that that has kind of a ripple effect going out into the future. For each transaction that happens with the sale of that house, the price will go up just a little bit based on market appreciation. There were funds that we're giving to the seller of the home to help them get into their next house. But the lower that we can start the cost of a house, the cheaper it's going to be all the way into the 50 years from now into the future when it sells to its 10th owner. Really setting that low makes a big difference.
Other questions?
Do you have information on the demographics of the folks that you've been helping, or last year, any numbers that you have collected as far as race, ethnicity?
We do have all of that information. I don't have it with me right now, but it's something that I could message about and get back to you with.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is that specific to this program or specific to all of the programs that you have?
For all of the federal funds that we're receiving, and just for all of our housing in general, we're always tracking all of that information. Yep.
You're gathering all that demographic information.
And at different times, of course, based on how we track it, something might be 4 or 5, 6 months old, but we're constantly updating as we go through.
Yeah, so whatever close to real-time information you have, you could share.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah, I listened to part of the discussion with the city commission, was it just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, about funding for I've forgotten the exact title, diversity and inclusion. There is
Director of Inclusion.
Diversity and inclusion. And I think as advisory boards, we need to do all we can to be at the leading edge of thinking about those issues and incorporating those dynamics into our decision making. We don't have to wait for a new head count to come along. That was one comment that I appreciated from somebody that spoke against it. I didn't think he did all that strong of a job at the time, but one thing his comment was, we should all be thinking of these issues all the time, shouldn't take hiring a director. Well, yeah, we should all be thinking of finance issues all the time, but you still have a finance director. I mean,
It's no one's job. If it's anyone's job, it's no one's job.
Yeah, it's called leadership and accountability, and I'm a big believer in that, so, yeah. So excellent point, and Nick, you can share that information and just distribute it either to Diane or staff, or just direct to the members of the advisory board is fine.
Okay, perfect.
Whatever you prefer.
I'll send that along to Diane.
In fact, could you make a note that maybe we might put that in our questionnaire of when we ask for applicants, their demographics of whom they're serving?
Oh, that's an excellent addition.
We do have information about the LGBTQIA, our demographics and how they're underserved. And so we'd like to know information about all of them. If we have that available, that'd be great. If we don't, maybe started making a questionnaire about asking that question.
And I think something that's been helpful for me when we're tracking information is to not only see the demographics of who's being served, but to be able to contrast that against the demographics of the makeup of Lawrence. Because sometimes something looks really low or high, and then you look and you see like, oh, actually, it's different than I had previously thought it would be. So I think if you're including the demographics of who's being served, maybe also the Lawrence demographics in there to contrast against.
Okay. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks.
Let's see, number 2 is the Housing Authority with their transitional housing program. Good morning.
Morning. I have this to share.
Certainly. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Galal Obeid. I am the Director of Operations at the Housing Authority. Just a little bit of information I wanted to share about the program. It was developed in 1995 with the city. The city reached out to Housing Authority to develop this program specifically for the use of the home funds. And so you can find this transitional housing as a program is found in the city's strategic plan, the Step Up to Better Housing, and it's one of the primary projects being utilized to address the city's need for affordable housing. And so this program not only serves as a transitional housing, but it offers households, which was Brad made a comment earlier, largely at 30% or below, the opportunity to move to permanent supportive housing assistance through our HCV or Section 8 program. So to date, the TBRA program has served over 500 households, and for 24 months, they receive rental assistance with a one-time support of a security deposit and utility deposits up to $1,000. All the households are referred by our partner agencies, and you can see a list of them. We work with a lot of them in town. These agencies also commit to a 24-month service with these households. So they are receiving case management, they are receiving the support in order to successfully complete the program and transition to that and receive that permanent voucher. So if an agency does not have the capacity to give that case management, they often work with other agencies that are approved to give that case management support. Let's see. There's a funding summary of what we've received from these home funds in those slides. And you can tell from the program summary overview, when we do receive that full funding, we're able to really support a lot of households in the community. One of the best part of this program is it's very successful. We're at 83% success rate. Households are going from experiencing homelessness into affordable housing units. Let's see. So since 2014, just to break it down for the area median income, 86% have been at 30% or below. 13% are at that 31 and 50, and we have 1% that go up to the 60%. And since 2014, 234 individuals have been served, 130 of them being children. Since 2008, 125 households have successfully transitioned from the transitional program to receiving that HCV or Section 8 voucher. 18 exit the program favorably early, so sometimes they're moving just to market rent, or they move in with a partner, or they leave the county, so making them ineligible for that program. And we've had 30 households that have not successfully completed that program. We're seeing like a growing increase in terms of success, and I think it's largely due to the commitment of our partner agencies. Just in the last year, we went from 80% lease-up rate for our special voucher programs to 91%. That means 91% of our households that are receiving vouchers are finding homes in our community and they're being rented to. LDCHA does not charge any administrative costs. So all the money that we receive, it does get applied to the community members. Receiving the full $300,000 that's being requested will house the next 15 to 20 households. That's about 50 individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness. There are currently 58 households on our wait list specifically for this program. That's 133 children and adults waiting to find stable housing, affordable stable housing. The average monthly housing assistance that these households receive is about $600. So every $600 is going to house a family or an individual for 30 days. And it goes beyond just housing. It offers them ability to kind of food security, to better physical and mental health, the ability to, if they're work able, to have the support and stability to find employment and know that they can make it to work every day. And then just to have a space for a stable environment for your children, whether it's near their schools or whatnot. This program is very, very successful, and we'd like to continue to see it being funded, especially at that full amount that's being requested. With that, I'll take questions.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
The reference to funding this program at the requested $300,000 would house the next 15 to 20 households. That's not incremental from what you've received before. That's the total number of households served with $300,000.
Correct. So we look at the size of the household that often often determines what that HAP amount will be. HAP is the housing assistance payment. So the larger the household, the larger amount that we provide to that household. So.
And just a clarification that the referring agencies and those who provide the case management supports, that is not part of this funding.
Correct.
Oh, okay, okay. This is for the rental assistance then only?
Only.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Yep.
Thank you.
So are these vouchers that, this is kind of a side question, but are these vouchers that would the Penn Lofts complex would be required to accept?
Correct.
So that's 47 units potentially. So we have a place to use the vouchers, because that's always been a comment of Shannon's. We have vouchers, but we don't have places to use them.
Takes a long time to find.
To find,
Right.
so, okay. Just clarifying.
And a number of families who we've served have had to have extensions, and how many are allowed? 3?
3 extensions.
And a few people
Yeah.
run
So,
out of their
100
extensions because there's nobody
Yeah.
willing to take a chance.
What happens to the program participants, the 30 that don't successfully exit the program?
So often we see them recycle through different programs.
Okay.
Or they find services through other partnering agencies that offer some kind of housing assistance.
Okay. But they're primarily staying in the community. They're not, I mean, some small number of them are leaving the community, but most of them are staying in the community, you think?
I would think most of them stay in the community, just from seeing who comes back and reapplies to the program.
Okay. And are they allowed to come back and reapply?
No, as of now, the way that the home is kind of written, it's up to 24 months of assistance. So they wouldn't be, we have other transitional programs in place that are not necessarily home funded.
Okay.
Correct. So
Okay.
we have like state funds that are home, and then we have special vouchers that we create through the Moving to Work.
Okay. Other questions?
So I guess one, if this were not funded here, and I'm not suggesting that, but would you go to those other sources to look for that funds, or is this just kind of, this is the place to get the funds for this program, or historically? Or?
Correct. My understanding is that this program was created so that these home funds can be utilized.
Okay.
In that way. So we don't, the home state funds that we get are for a different program, and that's with Burt Nash
Okay.
coordinated that way,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It serves a different population.
Yeah, okay.
And you already made mention of this, these partner agencies are not funded due to the
Correct. We don't-
partners that
Correct.
have that communication.
Correct. We have really strong partners, and the success is due to them largely. We just administer and kind of keep track of the paperwork.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Habitat for Humanity. I know Erica was here and excused herself.
Yeah, that's a, she can't comment.
She can't comment. Yeah. Yeah.
I think if there were any specific questions, staff would probably be able to answer on the
Sure,
Habitat one,
and-
based on the past funding that we've done through the years with them.
Yes, and
Redundant. They have 359,719 to award after the 66.
Yes. By filling in that minimum, that does bump down what's left to 359,719.
well, I have a proposal that really stems from Edith's suggestion. My suggestion would be that I wrote some numbers down here, that we consider funding the one unit, the foundation, for the One Home Habitat for Humanity. And by the way, I don't know if they've done that in the past, but I like the idea of them coming to us requesting funding for a specific element of the home. And here's why I like that. If somebody asks me later, you know, so does AHAB support this Habitat for Humanity buildings? I don't want to be able to say to them, yeah, we put $25,000 into that house, you know, at such and such an address. I want to be able to say, the house at such and such an address, we put in the basement and all of the flat concrete work. That was the city's contribution. I kind of like being able to be as specific as possible, I think, and responding to that, rather than just thinking that we're commingled funds in a pot, and then our dollars start to look like everybody else's. It's maybe just a subtle and not substantive distinction, but somehow my mind feels better with that decision. That
makes you feel better.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like that it came that way, as opposed to, you know, the house is going to cost $140,000, we want 25. So I don't know how other people reacted to that, but I thought that was a good approach.
I don't know that I had that reaction, but I did think it was nice to be first in. You know, we're doing the foundation and they're going to figure out the rest, you know. That's how I kind of look at it. It's like we put the seed money in for this project, and
you guys,
good or bad, that's where my emotion went.
Well, what I always like about this is a public-private kind of partnership. We give partly the public piece, and they are raising the money for the rest.
Privately.
I think that is an excellent point. And, you know, we've been having this discussion, what do public-private partnerships look like in affordable housing? This is a pretty successful model right here. You know, not that we didn't want to put all of our money here, but you know, they participate with for-profit subs, and they're out in the community buying, and many of those subs, when they're working on tenant-to-homeowner projects like this, they are priced accordingly. And yeah, everyone's working hard to make these. I like that. Anyway, my recommendation would be to fund the 25,575. My suggestion is not a motion. My suggestion would be to fully fund that. Take the, and that would leave then 235,575. 235,575.
We just have the Habitat full, 25,575, and then the minimum.
That would leave the,
of the CHOTO set aside, then that would leave 334,144.
334,144.
After awarding those two amounts.
Okay, I've got a lot of different numbers floating around, but 334,144.
I've got a live spreadsheet going on up here.
One other thing I liked about this is, you know, I'm sorry I'm the numbers guy, but it's under 10,000 a bed. And that's kind of, to me, that's kind of been the threshold we've seen, is where we've kind of funded projects that are about 10,000 a bed or under, is kind of where our, kind of that bang for the buck.
It's a lot better than like 23 Tennessee, 23rd Street, Tennessee. That's
it's been a little more, but anyway, I just for another comparative data point for your thought process.
334,144. And we've got left before us we've got 334,130. So the 25,575 comes out of that? Is that correct?
That's after.
That's after
Yeah,
the-
the 334, 144 is after the 25, 575 is taken out.
Are you ready for another suggestion? Or
Yes,
can I make-
please do, because I've obviously made a math error here, and I can't figure out where it is. Go right ahead, Lonnie.
That's all right. I spent 2 days on a spreadsheet last week
Okay.
before I figured out, get out the balance. But, I guess on the Housing Authority, I don't know that I would go all the way to 300, but I would like to see us increase our funding over last year. That's got a nice upward trend to it to get back to 300, and maybe we'll get there someday. So I'm going to suggest we go somewhere around 250 on that one. We were at what was it last year?
You're at 233.
233, so 250 to 260 on that one, might suggest is a nice.
260?
250 to 260 to get your, I don't know where everything else comes out, but I would like to see us make
Yep.
continue that upward climb in that funding on that program, because I think it's a great program. And it serves our most at need folks.
In the spirit of making a hard decision or ruffling up a discussion, I would vote for the Housing Authority to get all their requests. And I don't know if that would be if that would shake up the system too much from what folks have received in the past of what would be left over. I don't know, but
Are you including the funding for Habitat in your thoughts?
well, I'm just starting with the amount to award. I'm starting with 300 to Housing Authority, and then whatever's left
Okay.
is what.
So maybe just for your notes, can you put the 250 back in? Just so we can kind of keep these different scenarios separate. So with Monty's suggestion and leaving Habitat in there, that leaves $84,144.
Okay.
And that includes the required piece?
Correct. That
Okay.
includes the required 15%.
Have you got the 22,314?
That is not included in this.
We've not talked about that yet.
Oh, I would do that.
Well, that's
That's an optional piece.
Operating expense to manage the CHOTO for our city.
yeah, I mean, that needs to be, that's a required,
No,
It's not required.
that's a minimum.
The only.
A maximum.
That's the-
Mock-
You are allowed to award them up to 5% for operating expenses.
And the funds go where?
They would go to tenants to homeowners to
As the CHOTO.
operate the CHOTO.
I think when you think about what that organization and other organizations as well contribute to what Housing Authority's doing, providing those wraparounds and doing that, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't fund a portion of that operation when you think about funding the other things.
Well, and I hearken back to Edith's comment, if we took them down dramatically, then we're doing that without them receiving really any prior notice from a discussion taking place that's suddenly reduced the operating funds that,
No, I'm suggesting you do fund it.
yeah,
Okay.
and I'm
You're
supporting
saying,
that.
okay.
Yeah, if you give them a big cut, Paul,
Good.
then
Which line item? We're talking about the 5%?
we're talking about the
22,000, yes.
22,314.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, we haven't put your thing up there
Yeah,
yet.
I started with your scenario.
Yeah, we haven't started with yours yet.
If we finish.
So if you did this, then potentially
What's that
you've got 61,830 that could go to
First time.
the first
First-time
time.
homeowners.
homeowner.
But between that one and if you had made the decision that you would rather give more than the 15%
Yeah.
for the CHOTO reserve. Yeah.
That's what they asked for though, right?
Regulatory, they're required to give, the city is required to give 15% as a minimum. And they're usually do put on their application that minimum amount, but historically, if you look at the funding, there were years that they were awarded additional on top of that 15%. But if we do, stuck with the 15% and then filled in the remainder, that's what that scenario
Looks
would,
like.
would look like.
Do you want to just create another tab and we can?
If it'll let me, copy and paste it.
Well,
I've got it locked.
Oh,
So,
Paul, I like a distribution like this more than taking the rental assistance program to 300,000 and having to reduce the first-time homeowner program. Basically, we'd be cutting it in half or more.
So yeah, as we plugged in, by keeping that required 15% minimum in and fully funding the TBRA program, you are then left with $59,719 to allocate.
between the three remaining
Between the three remaining.
applications.
So if we did the 22,314, we're left with 37,405. That's half what they received last year. They were at 73,000 last year.
Well, and that's without funding Habitat too.
Yeah, and that doesn't even
Yeah.
include funding Habitat, that number.
Yeah,
Oh, that doesn't include the 25,575.
Yes, if you went that one also,
yeah,
Yeah.
then you've got 11,830.
yeah, couldn't support that.
Well, I come back around to, I personally think all of these programs are very meritorious.
Yeah.
And
Certainly.
I'm more drawn towards having a distribution that more closely resembles what was done last year, and adding the Habitat for Humanity bill at the 25,000 requested, whatever, 25,575. That doesn't result in any big increase for anyone. But I myself don't feel as though we've had the kind of discussion that would cause me to want to change the prioritization of the funding from last year. I still see all of these needs as tremendous, significantly underfunded. They're not open-ended needs. I like the idea of restoring a Habitat for Humanity build, which would be the incremental thing that we're doing, because this is the other end of the pipeline in my mind. You know, if we've got community funds going to homeless shelter, we've got funds going into transitional programs, we've got funds going into affordable rental projects. At the end, as people move through these assistance programs, eventually we want them to come out the back end and enter into the marketplace if they want to become homeowners at all. And this is one of, I see as the end of the pipeline. This is, you know, we've got to have an exit strategy for people long-term. We don't want to create systems to just keep them on subsidies forever if they have the ability to grow out of that. So I like the idea of supporting that. If we didn't do that unit, I would be okay, I'd be fine with adding those funds to the rental assistance program. I hate to have it be a trade-off one against the other.
So just a couple comments. This is federal dollars, so it's not our trust fund dollars. It's real important that we all think of that too. It's new advisory that has been moved to us this year, and probably the right place to be is here in the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. Everyone loves the story of homelessness to homeowners, but in the 12 years we've been open in Lawrence at Family Promise, we've had 4 families, which is great. Those are 4 families to celebrate, but it's not the norm.
Okay.
And there is a huge need. Last year, calls increased by 30%. No, by 30% for us, for families needing services. About 2/3 of the families we serve in Lawrence do get housing through this as their entry point. About 1/3 don't qualify, so they have extra challenges. So it's just something to be aware of. These are people that are in our schools, go to school with our kids. We come in contact with them every day of the year. They're in our community, and they need to be housed. And the success rate is pretty good.
The success rates. Excellent.
Of keeping people housed.
Just, go ahead.
And I am still going to advocate for, and I agree with all of that, and I am still going to advocate for Habitat for Humanity. We didn't fund them last year at all. They're a good organization. We can fund.
And I hear the data, and one of my interpretations of the data is you obviously don't have enough entry-level homes for people to move into because you only got 4. 4 families that moved to homes.
No, homeowners, homeownership.
I think that's
12 years.
You only have 4 families that moved to home ownership, which tells me there are barriers to home ownership that need to be addressed. And, the other 2 programs do that, one for a single specific home and the other for some multiple homes. So I get that there's a huge and growing need at the bottom end, but you have to have a system that supports people moving out of the system also. Otherwise, we're just building a bigger and bigger affordable housing subsidy industry, and that's not what we're trying to do.
But again, the program, these home funds, remember the purpose of these home funds. I completely concur, and I concur here too, but the purpose of these home funds, we need to make sure we're evaluating this pot of money for the purposes that it comes to Lawrence.
So,
But it came for these, they've been funding this. So
Right.
I can't say that these funds were not for this purpose. They've been funding this purpose.
No, I'm not arguing against, I'm just stating some facts that are current in our community.
so I'm wondering if the tenants to homeowners request, or not tenants to homeowners, the Habitat for Humanity request could move over to the trust fund side, because that really is, I think, about creating affordable housing, and maybe this is really more about the services that are provided to get people in there. I don't know.
Except that ship has sailed, and that request cycle is gone. And now we're in this funding for this, and for us to say, no, we're not going to fund you through this, but make a recommendation for you to apply there. I don't think that's quite,
Okay.
if we were doing them all at the same time, if we had all of this pot of money together, we might have that luxury to,
Yeah, we'd move it around. I get that too.
So I just want to provide a little bit of backup, and from a logistical standpoint, I think I might be seen as arguing against myself because I do have a...
I've done that before.
I have a,
It's myself.
Just means you're listening to the conversation.
my background, I should be advocating strongly for the first-time home buyers. In my occupation, I should be supporting that, and I do. And I have a soft spot in my heart for that, and I see that as a vital role in the housing market in general. But when I look at the housing authority and see the kids, see that they take, they're not charging like an administrative fee, that took a little bit of, that pushed it over the edge for me personally, but I'm not going to be a roadblock on any thing that the group decides. I just wanted to provide a little additional information of where my perspective was coming from.
Yeah, I would second that too. I see the houses and hear the kids and hear about what you're doing to supplement and help these families continue to grow. I think homeowners in the, Tennessee homeowners in the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority proposals seem promising, and they're sustainable, and they account for the financial situations of lower income folks without requiring them to eventually join the middle class in order to continue living comfortably in their homes. We're talking about, like, eventually kids who are graduating high school, whose parents are staying in affordable housing, and they're hopefully going on to college or going on to other educational endeavors, and they're able to do that because their homes are providing them, or affordable housing is providing that situation now. To answer, I don't know the answer to your question about home ownership, but in that state space and that they have available for their families, they're able to think about home ownership, they're able to think about living comfortably, they're able to have money to do other things, like put their kids into track or football or things like that, so they can talk about home ownership and putting themselves in the spaces comfortably and affordably and permanently. So yeah, I think we can support both those. It looks like financially, maybe that could happen for both.
Can you go back to the one you had, the original one?
250?
Yeah, I thought you did a cut and paste on that.
No, we couldn't. It's locked.
You locked your own spreadsheet, huh?
But that's what it was right there. It was
Yeah.
Monty's suggestion of 250, then left 61,830.
Put that in the loan program.
Yeah, in the number one. Is that what you were talking about, Edith? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was the other way, the full 300 here, that would leave 11,830 there.
No. I could support the first one.
Okay.
I have a question
Yes,
on
ma'am.
that. Are there any other funding sources for that first-time home? Is that it? I think that was in the application, but I can't
Do
remember.
you guys get any other, to my knowledge, they don't, but,
They could just be their own private
yeah.
funds that they have amassed
That,
by
yeah.
building and selling homes. It would be their, Yep. When they're assisting others, I think there are certain individuals that are able to apply for other programs, the state or the Topeka Federal Home Loan Bank, if they're eligible for that. I don't know if there still is. There used to be one specifically for disabled individuals, but I don't know if that one is still around.
I think a lot of times we're multiplying those things, and so we're doing both, working with the Federal Home Loan Bank and receiving this with the hopes that we can get, not a specific case, but on average, that someone's down payment for a house would be in between $1,200 and $2,000
Okay.
for a down payment on a house. So we're leveraging both of those things together.
Thank you.
And while in a roundabout way, it could come back to a tenant's property, the Housing Authority does have a down payment match program, right?
$3,000.
Up to $3,000 for their folks, kind of in thinking of that housing spectrum and moving people forward, so, make sure.
Yeah, we've had we just did 101,000 homeowners, 101 homeowners through the LDC.
Any other questions? There's currently no motion on the table. The chair would entertain a motion.
I move number one.
Which was the
250.
250,
And 61.
the 61, the 25,575.
I would second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Any other discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Excellent discussion, very thoughtful.
very good.
Very thoughtful
Thank you, guys.
considerations.
Just as far as next steps go, this will go to the city commission for their public hearing on April, I think the date is the 23rd, it's the third meeting in April. So that will be the public hearing, and then it will go back to them after that for their final adoption.
The public hearing kind of, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
that's okay.
We announced to the public the recommended allocations.
Yep.
And then there's a 30-day statutory required public comment period. So we have to put a notice in the paper stating that this public comment period and how they can contact us with questions or suggestions. And then all of those comments are then provided back to the city commission when they make their final funding recommendation.
And typically, we would ask the chair to be in attendance as well, to be able to speak to, the recommendation process and kind of how you got to your decision, so.
Can you break that spreadsheet with the colors back on there for a
Sure.
second, please?
Can I ask one more question? And maybe I asked this at our last meeting, I don't recall. Are there any other funds we should know about that might be coming to us to administer?
Not that we know about.
Okay.
So we're always looking for new opportunities, but
Easter's coming and we could use it.
A miracle.
But yes, another miracle would be.
See, you think of the eggs, I think of the church thing miracle.
I was thinking of be nice to have another basket of eggs.
That's right.
Distributed.
Because, I still, every now and then, I learn about some other program that I didn't know existed, and I'm trying to get my head around to see the whole picture, that we could sort of lay it all out and see how it all fits together in this, what seems to be a puzzle still to me. And if this is it, if these funds and this is it.
at this time, this is the only other one that we have that would come to you for allocation purposes or
Okay.
information purposes. We also do have the Emergency Solutions Grant that is awarded through the state. We will definitely bring information to you about that. We're the pass-through. It will fund things like a rapid rehousing program, homelessness prevention, and emergency shelter operations, but the state actually designates who the awardees are. So we process the applications and submit them, and then the state comes back to us and says, we're going to award agency A, B, and C particular funds.
But the state makes that determination?
They do, yeah.
Does the community provide input into that?
Typically, the agencies
Compete.
will,
That's-
yeah, it is competitive. They're competing with the rest of the state, so.
And is that Alyssa Isis now?
No, it's not hers.
It's not
No,
her?
nope, it's through a different part of KHRC.
Okay.
So what we can do is we can kind of keep you informed when the NOFA does drop from them. Usually it's in the springtime.
Okay.
Typically, we send it out to the agencies. The agencies would come back to us with their program proposals. Now, it's very well defined about who can receive funding for this program, because it is a homeless funding program. So we couldn't fund a Habitat House, or we couldn't, we couldn't fund a lot of these things out of that, including, unfortunately, the TBRA program, because for whatever reason, the housing authorities are not allowed to apply for the ESG money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
What would be helpful for that puzzle is something like on page 2 down here, looking again in the city, looking again at what we did when we first started, the whole affordable landscape, from homeless and sheltering, needing shelter, to available units for rent and available units in the current. When we had the housing study, but that doesn't address temporary housing and emergency housing and that kind of thing. Something like that might be helpful to revisit at some point to help put that jigsaw together for all of us. You're not alone in that.
I think that's a great idea, and it would allow us, it's a different opportunity looking at some silos of mutual interest
Yeah.
vertically, and then we could look to see what are the amount of resources that we've put in there, dollar amounts, what those resources have been able to reach, how many individual or families, and what kind of settings, to see where our impact is. We should be looking at demographics to the extent we can pull those of the people served.
But not just,
Because I
not
like
just
these
from our
categories
not just from our city funding, but what else is going on in the city, and where should we maybe target some of the funding,
Or even where they are.
where they are.
You know, when I first started, and to be honest, even now, I'm not sure I even know where they all are in the city.
Physically, you mean?
Physically in the city.
I think that possibly back in some documents that was provided to the board, the housing vision, I'm not sure if it, because I know you came on kind of after the
depends on
onset,
when
but I believe the housing vision chart was provided, and I think it was the one where we listed the amount of units available. Is that?
As of 2015
As of
was,
20, yeah,
was
so
I
that
think the
needs-
last time that a count was done on those number of units.
Yeah, so there are different documents that speak to kind of everything that you guys are wanting to know. So I think it's probably just figuring out how to get that in one piece, which.
Edith, I would just add as a reminder, so on the retreat agenda, we did provide a link for information about the general social service funding that the city provides. So that is something, it doesn't go through this board directly, but sometimes there could be the potential for a little bit of overlap with some of the issues that this board deals with. So, for example, that's the funding source that the city uses for funding the Lawrence Community Shelter, as an example.
Yeah, I remember that.
And for some reason, I'm thinking we updated that housing vision for possibly a memo for the city commission, like not terribly recently, like maybe within the last couple of years. So we'll look through and we'll find that copy of the housing vision and see, because it just lists, starting at the homeless shelter all the way to permanent housing, and then there's a list of who provides that and how many units they have under each of those. So it's just a question of when it was updated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't have the benefit of having printed off an updated agenda, but I saw that there was an email out that we were going to defer one or more items.
If we're ready to move to that next item on the agenda, that Bethel Estates and the Porch Light Homes, you all had indicated a desire to look at those funding agreements.
Yes.
We had intended to bring those to you. They're not back yet from the applicants. We wanted a chance for the applicants to be sure to review those. So they will be on your April meeting, is the intention.
Okay, very good. And then, had you left on there some time for source of income data discussion?
Yes. There's some information that Shannon had provided, I believe, to you all that we included in the packet.
Yeah.
And we do actually still have a couple of items on that number 3 that are memos that speak to the questions that the board had posed for those.
Yes, on the number of, the length of affordability, Bethel Estates.
Yes.
Confirmed at 30 years is the agreement.
Yes.
And the number of units at the 23 Tennessee Flats were 3.
Yes.
2 bedrooms and 1 3-bedroom for a total of 7 bedrooms for 125.
I believe that's right. That was just additional questions that you had asked us to follow up on. So.
I did the math on that, I was like 117 or something a bedroom, so the other units we were looking at on, an apples to apples basis, the other investment looks favorable.
Dollar per bed, yeah.
Yeah, dollar per bed looks very favorable.
Like I said, that's
Not to say these aren't great projects also, they were very good projects. Any other questions about the affordability or the number of affordable units for 2310? That material was distributed. Discussion on the source of income data. Shannon, you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So what I sent you was a report on like how long it took in 18 and in 19 for people who get issued a voucher and to use it. And so in 19 it was 62.5 days. So of course that's an average. So half the people are longer than that. My guess is most of the people that were shorter than that are people who were leasing in place. So, and you can see that was up, about 6 days or so from the prior year. And what we have found is it takes longer and longer for people to be able to use their voucher. I'm not sure I could totally say exactly why that is. Could be cost, could be, rental credit check. There's a lot of different things that it can be, but I don't know. Dana may have some ideas.
Yeah, we're seeing that too. It's just, and I don't have a number. I don't have a number of how many, this is what I would refer to as Shannon's, but the number of people we're trying to help find vouchers and going back to the Housing Authority for an extension and going back to them for another extension.
The extensions are,
voucher in hand. Somebody
looking for a landlord that will take the voucher.
Yeah, and so the voucher comes, it has a 60-day term. And then if you can't find someplace, all you have to do is ask us and we'll extend it another 60 days. It's after that 120 days that we're like, okay, we have to make sure, are you looking? What is the problem? Why aren't you? Because we can't have somebody holding a voucher that they're not using for months and months and months.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, so I'd say we've really seen sort of an increased time frame for people to be able to lease up.
And when we're working with them, or other case managers from other agencies are working with them, I can speak Family Promise, we're out there with them looking for housing. So it's not that they're not looking, or that they're sitting on their voucher. It's that they can't find some place to take their voucher.
Shannon, does the Housing Authority maintain a list of the total possible number of units available in the community for rent?
We don't really have a total possible, but we keep a list of landlords that will rent to, who will accept vouchers, and we allow them to, and then they will contact us when they have a unit available. So sometimes we'll be like, hey, we know this unit's available, go see that. But of all of the available units, we don't have a list of that.
And virtually all of this building of university housing that took place the last 10 years, none of those landlords are making those units accessible for vouchers, are they? There's really aren't these kind of two separate markets? And there's not a lot of interplay at this point between the two? Is that a correct statement?
What I would feel comfortable saying is that the student housing that got built in the by the room model. So I'm student A and I'm renting room 1 and student B's renting room 2 and they're sharing the common area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of that.
And there is a lot of that.
Yeah.
That is not at all, first of all, we would have to develop some special program to even be able to use a voucher in that model, because that is not how a voucher, we have some special single room occupancy vouchers that we use with CLO, right? Because it's a shared house and has staff in it. But that is a very special model. You just couldn't take your regular voucher and run over there and say, I'm renting 1 bedroom and 1/4 of the living room and the kitchen.
Yeah.
We would not be able to.
Dorm models really aren't a fit at all.
No,
Yeah.
that is not a fit for people with a voucher.
And has that not freed up other apartment
I mean, they're just not out there, or they're just not accepting?
I wish
You would
I
think that
knew
would-
the answer to
you know,
that,
built-
right?
However many thousands of apartments in Lawrence in the last 3
Right.
years, you would think that would have freed up other stock that's maybe older, you know.
Yet the
But it hasn't seemed to do that.
Increase, so, yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't done that.
Yeah.
Well, and
It's a-
we see one of the responses in the marketplace, KU has closed a dorm. Just they announced that, a couple of weeks ago, so, yeah.
But that has to do
Interesting
with
change
freshman
transition.
enrollment.
Pardon me? Yes.
That has to do
Yeah.
with freshman enrollment and call it the pig and the python. In 2008, there was a significant drop in births, and we're going to fall off the cliff here.
Which is not good for
Which is
all
not
these
good.
units,
Yeah.
right? I mean.
No, I mean, that's why the
Interesting.
KU's taken, I mean, they're looking at what's coming and going, we're not going to need quite as many units.
Yeah, and what I will say is we've had several projects exit, like for a while, what used to be Westgate and then became Rohan Ridge was working their way out of vouchers, but then they still take them now. They kind of came back around. But what happens is a lot of the affordable units, once they exit the affordable period, well, then they want to charge more rent, and there's a kind of a 3-year process for them being able to raise the rent that way. And which, as long as they stay within the adopted fair market rent isn't a problem, but it's when they bump out of that, that's a problem for us, so.
And that's a range that's determined by some,
So the federal government issues every year what the fair market rent is in Lawrence.
okay, yeah.
And the housing authority adopts 110% of that number as the payment standard. So we will pay up to 110% for a unit, and it's by bedroom size. So that is just a little bit of information about how long it's taken people to lease up. And then I attached just this FAQ for Seattle's program because it gives a lot of detail, and kind of the reason I picked this one was so that you can kind of see how complicated trying to have one of these programs is, and it's not just one of these things where we would just say, oh, let's do this, right? Because you'd have to have some enforcement mechanism. And, they're very specific. If you read that Seattle, they're very specific about, you gotta, you're telling a private landlord that they have to take the very next first person in line if they have a vow. And so, it's a higher regulation. And so it's just one of those things that, we want to do this very thoughtfully, right? And this, I think, document helps us sort of go through all the issues that you would run into. And then the final thing that I attached.
Referring to the FAQ. Yeah, okay.
Just to show you kind of the level of detail we are going to need to think through before we make some sort of recommendation, because this is not as simple as saying, let's adopt an ordinance that says you can't discriminate against people with a source of income. Because a rule like that is only as good as your ability to make it happen, right? And then the other thing that I attached, because is the KSA 1216-120, which is this is the statute that prohibits inclusionary zoning, that was adopted by the Kansas legislature. But in it has a very specific prohibition on controlling the amount of rent charged. And so I do think one of the things that we will have to think about is if you adopt a source of income, and we cannot, and do we drive the price of rent up as a way for landlords who don't, because we are not allowed to say to landlords, you can only charge whatever our adopted FMR is, right? And so then the question is, will one of the unintended consequences be to drive the cost of rent up so that they don't have to take vouchers?
Right.
Right? And so it's.
They take themselves out of the club. Yeah.
And so that was as I was reading this, because I wanted to make sure that it didn't prohibit any sort of source of income prohibition, but it doesn't really have that, but it does have we can't tell anybody how much rent they can charge. So that's a piece we'll want to have in the mix to understand, sort of the full range of what we have to think through before we go make any recommendation to somebody about adopting this kind of thing.
Another key and critical component, kind of following along, didn't these nice new places that rent by the room free up some older spaces, is consideration of utilities and the cost of utilities in larger, older spaces.
Yeah, cost of ownership is higher.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about utilities? We've got some folks here in the room that work with the programs that are building and supporting new housing. Everybody seems to be going all electric for everything in new builds. With natural gas being so inexpensive, why are we doing that? Is it just because the front end build is cheaper?
That's the reason that Habitat is currently doing it. The cost to put in a house that is not at all electrical is more expensive on the front end. That's exactly the reason.
Okay. But, I mean, if I were to pick a fuel for the future for the next 50 years, I'm all in on natural gas. It is, the marketplace looks very stable and very low priced for a long time.
Yeah, every time we go to build a house, we reevaluate the costs and look at the costs. And then it just comes down to a budgeting issue. What can we make work with our budget?
Okay.
And this is.
So the front end cost is the big prohibitor for installing gas in these homes at the front end. Okay.
I think
The cost of installing gas is prohibitive? Is that what you're saying?
It's cheaper for us to do an all-electrical house. It doesn't cost as much for us to do a house that's all electrical as it would if we put in natural gas as well.
I think too.
We might get some natural gas guys to come in and talk about that.
Yeah, we've met
they've probably been meeting with you
multiple
already, haven't
times,
they?
yeah.
Yeah, well, the efficiency of heat pumps and all that has also kind of changed the spectrum on the cost of the electricity. So, I mean, the equipment there still has room to gain efficiency where your natural gas equipment does not. You're already at 93% on gas typically.
It's real high, yeah.
So there's not a lot of room to gain efficiency. Where on the electrical side, there is more room.
There's no complaints about operating costs with electricity, like an electric water heater versus a gas water heater? For like monthly utilities?
Not for the efficiency rating that we build the houses at currently.
I think Habitat was gonna,
Nick?
not Habitat, Tennessee Homeowner.
I was gonna say, one of the other components of why we're also going all electric is we're just looking at not only the upfront cost for the build, but then what it costs someone to inhabit the space. And so if you completely cut out one monthly bill upfront, regardless of usage, you have that initial, $27 or whatever it is that you're paying just to have that utility at all. And if you look at that over the span of a 60, 70-year, life of the home, it becomes significant. And then also we're consulting with folks that are saying that, hopefully that there's becomes more efficient ways to garner electricity, and that becomes more prevalent, and we're able to implement some of those things in the houses. So we're anticipating in the future that maybe we're adding a solar array once it becomes even more affordable to a house, and that can just plug into what we have as an electrical system. So we're trying to anticipate some of that in the future.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Other questions or comments?
Thanks for this information, Jen.
Thank you, Shannon.
Sure.
Consider holding retreat in August or September. I'm interested in having us do that. August is always kind of problematic with vacations, baseball league gets over and folks go on vacation and the schools turn right around and ramp up. But if there's a date in September that people would be interested in, and I would like to ask this question, attendance from the public at our meetings is pretty sparse. Do we want to consider changing the time, or we're not changing the time because we haven't picked a time, but do we, when we set a time, if we have an interest in a second offsite this year, if we set that time, do we want to, how much consideration do we want to give to setting it at a time when perhaps more members of the public could attend? I don't know how big of a priority that should be for us. Maximizing the attendance from our board, I think, is the most important metric, to get as many voices from the board in attendance. But if we want to consider how do we maximize public participation, is that a thing that we should be concerned about, or should we just be comfortable that the video feed is live, it's inventoried, people can go back and review the video anytime they'd like, that type of thing, and not let that be a consideration in setting the date. I just raised the issue to see if what people's thoughts are on that. Thoughts? Interest in a second offsite?
Yeah, I'm fine either way. If we think more people want to come, I'm happy to meet when they can be here.
I actually think board participation, especially at a retreat, is really priority.
More participation from board?
Board at a retreat.
Yeah. I thought, didn't we end up with everyone but one?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Any other discussion there then? Continue to look, maybe we start looking at a schedule doodle to find some dates.
Do you want to look at September dates? I mean, and one option could be that you make, you extend your September meeting.
We sure could do
Allow for
that.
that if you want to do something that's already quasi-scheduled.
Yeah, what is the date of that September meeting? Let's look at that real quick.
Let's see.
14th.
Yes, 14th.
That works for me.
Yeah, the new LMH West is opening that date. It'll be a good date for Lawrence.
Really?
Doing some kind of ribbon cutting or something out there.
Current plan.
Really? You really think it's going to open time?
So possibly a longer meeting on September 14th? Let's tentatively plan on that.
Would you prefer to do something all morning, or just have it kind of start at the regular time and then go into the afternoon? Or
Well, first let's ask about availability of staff, and Monday mornings are kind of, when I had my own business, that was always the hair fire session to see what was there when you came in. So I don't know if that works for staff or
be
not.
that way.
Yeah.
We'll defer to your availability.
Let's survey board members and find out what their preference is.
Okay. Do you want us to have any other options other than your September 14th meeting date?
What do you think, folks?
I am unable to do anything later than that on a Monday.
Okay. Anything later than what we currently do? Okay, so we would need to start in the morning?
No, I'm sorry. If we're looking at Mondays,
Yes.
any other Mondays in September past the 14th, I'm unable to attend.
Oh, other Mondays, okay, okay. But you could meet, for example, the afternoon of the 14th.
Or the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. Well, we have plenty of time to schedule it, so we could start with the 14th and get some idea of what works, and then go from there if we need to add additional dates, and report
Yeah.
back in April.
Yeah, okay, very good. New business, quick updates, the annual report from LDCHA and FPL. We're in our advanced materials, as well as the report from KHRC on the 2021 low-income housing tax credit applicants, revealing, no surprise, nobody from Lawrence. So confirmation of what we'd already been hearing from staff the last couple of months. For next year, there will be no LIHTC projects competing. But I sure like those projects, and I hope that developers look to Lawrence in the future. Is there anything we should be doing, Diane, or could be doing to help attract those projects in the future, or encourage certain of our partners to, because I noticed about a third of the applicants were not-for-profits. Is that correct?
I didn't look that closely at the list.
Weren't all the asterisked projects?
I think so,
They were
yeah.
not-for-profit, or they had not-for-profit partners, I think?
Yeah, and usually in those cases, they probably have a geographic limitation.
Yeah.
Of their service area anyway. But I suppose it doesn't hurt us to, in our discussion with Alyssa, we could follow up and see if there's a list that KHRC maintains that are different potential developers, just to let them know about it. I think we've done a bit of that sort of outreach in the past, if I'm recalling right. If you all recall, jump in. But
Okay.
I think that we've done some of that at a pretty high level a few years
Well,
ago.
and I saw that, I think Wheatland had some projects in other communities, and
They started in Gardner, and they came here.
they started Gardner? Okay.
They have
okay.
quite a few projects up there.
Okay. Well, they've been a great partner, I think, to the community. We want to encourage them and folks that want to do similar projects to give us a look.
Yeah, and I know of, some, like Tony Kresnick has other projects in other cities.
Other
in
communities,
Kansas.
yeah.
And so I think that isn't that unusual. So it certainly wouldn't hurt us to make those potential developers aware of Lawrence and reach out in some way. So we'll talk with Alyssa about whether there's a list of those that the state maintains somehow
Okay.
that we can communicate with.
The Kansas Housing Association may have one too, with their member agencies.
Okay. Any other items under new business?
Is the commission taking up the pin lofts on the 17th?
Yes, March 17th will be the public hearing date for that.
So are we going to review the language of the motion today? Or did I came in late, so I may have missed that.
There was an amendment made on that item to record Christina Gentry as abstaining from the vote, but there wasn't any further discussion on the language of the motion.
Okay.
March 17th. Okay. Okay, I'll be there. Anything else? Seeing no other business before the advisory board, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so it is kind of weird to walk back in the room and have no one tell us what happened.